Hi, it's Will Crockett, and welcome to another edition of the Smarter Photographer video series presented by ShootSmarter.com and DiscoverMirrorless.com. I am moving, slowly but surely, my photographic lighting style that's taken me a long time to build. In fact, it's always changing. I'm adapting it into the ability for us to not only shoot portraits with still photo camera equipment, but moving portraits, talking portraits. I want to be able to have that really crispy lighting that I have from my photo work that I've used flash as well as strobes and all kinds of variety of different light modifiers. But now I want to do it with LEDs. This series is called the ABCs of LEDs, and this first one is all about how to capture that captivating color. I'm kind of picky when it comes to color. I use it for not only describing products, right? I'm more of a commercial photographer than I am anything else. And we do have some products that are color sensitive, so we have to be able to create accurate images to give to our clients. But I use color, as you can see, as a bit of an accent and a little bit of a draw. Now, in this video, we're going to show you all kinds of different techniques. There's a couple different ways to do the techniques that I'm going to show you, and I'll share with you some of the shortcuts that we have because we have some equipment that a lot of people don't have. And we're not saying that you got to go out and buy color meters and colorimeters and all that other stuff, but I'm going to use it to show you how to think LED and color and light together. LED lights are good. They're not great. And I'll show you some data here in a little bit to tell you that they're a little fragile when you work with them. The light doesn't shape the same way that it does with a flash, right? A flash tube goes into an umbrella or goes into a softbox, and that tube comes out in all kinds of directions. Well, the LEDs are more of a lens in front of a light source, and they project forward. That means we do have to work with them differently in order to get this same look here that I'm comfortable with photo. Now I want to be comfortable with video. I've got to do a lot of things differently. I do. I also want to be able to use LEDs to take still photos. I want to be able to shoot the shutter right here and make a perfect still photo with more advanced cameras, right? DSLR as well as mirrorless. Higher ISO is easy to use. And in fact, a lot of the color controls are easy to use. So what you're looking at now is video that I shot with a mirrorless camera, by the way. All the brands of lights and cameras and lenses will be revealed in a segment at the end of this video. There's a lot of people that don't like when we show brands in educational content. I'm just trying to keep everybody happy. We want to be able to show you how we're going to control an LED's brightness, its color temperature, and then repair its LB, its light balance color, if it has a shift there. So first up, I want to show you how we make this shot here, how it's all fit together, both corrected and uncorrected. Here's why. This shot that you're viewing at now is made up of 9 different light sources, and I've got them all to kind of work with each other. The most difficult one, as you can guess, that's a television. And if you've ever tried to shoot video of a television as a prop in the background, you know how difficult it is. So for this example, we wanted to choose a rather challenging shot, and we wanted to be able to make it look kind of the Crockett style, right? The vivid color, shallow depth of field, kind of snappy contrast, right? This is my typical style of working. We don't have a whole lot of adjustment on that television, so we set the television to its normal color value. Then I did go into the menu and I pushed it to its warmest value because that TV, that's a big Panasonic Viera TV, a very good TV. Its white point, when we just put a white screen up on that TV, is 6,500 degrees Kelvin. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about color temperature, but by the time you get to the end of this video, and unfortunately, I know there's a lot of technical stuff we have to deal with. You may have to watch it a few times to make sure it all sinks in. I want you to be really comfortable by the time you're with how to adjust your color in order to meet your, visual creative juices. So I can't do a whole lot about that TV. So that means that my white point, meaning how am I going to set my camera to get that to look white? I'm going to have to match its color temperature with its white point. Hold on, I know, a little confusing. That has a color temperature that we can measure with a tool if we want to. I'll show you how to do it on a computer screen too. Well, if we want that to appear white or neutral, we need to set our camera's white balance value to equal that color. That means it's going to assign that as white, and we did. The white balance setting on the camera that we're using is set to the adjustable K mode, and it's set to 6,300K. Yeah. Well, you also notice that my main light here is a little warm, isn't it? Yeah, I like my main lights 3, 4, 500 degrees warmer than my white point that I'm set on my camera. I use adjustable K a lot. I use custom white balance more on DSLRs, but on mirrorless cameras, I'll use the adjustable K more than I do anything else. I also like my fill light neutral, and of course I've got a little blue here, a little high color temperature blue, just to accent, and this here is as neutral as it gets. Well, how do we do all that? Oh, I forgot one. We got one on the back of the laptop there too. How about I put in my favorite employee into the chair here, and I'm going to take a picture of each one of the lights, and then I'm going to take a picture of each one of the lights without their color correction, and wait till you see a big difference. Remember, I'll show you how to do all of this stuff as we go along. Ready? Here we go. Here's the final shot. Now, we do most everything in JPEG here, and there's been no post-processing whatsoever done to this image. The bold color and the bold contrast is all done in the camera with the type of settings that we use. Let's take a look at the main and the fill light. Here it is here. That's a white balance setting in the camera, of course, our adjustable K of 6300. And this is what it looks like when your main and fill have a combined color temperature of 5800K. It's nice and warm. And here's just the main light. Notice how warm it is? Well, when we add the fill light in there, it will neutralize some of that warmth. And if we were to take the main light and dial its color temperature in so that it's equal to our camera's white point, it would look just like this. Fill light. Here's what our fill light looks like as we shot it. Notice it looks kind of blue, right? Well, it is. That's because it's going to neutralize some of that lower color temperature, warmer light, so that when the main and fill blend together, it's going to look great. If we didn't adjust the fill and the fill happened to be at the same white point as our camera, you got it. That's what it'll look like. Well, you also notice the lower right corner there. Yeah, this is not a mistake. That's the back of the laptop, and we put a color temperature adjusting gel on there to drop its color temperature way down. And if we didn't, you'll notice if we left it neutral, it would look kind of out of place. You know, it looks maybe like it shouldn't be there. Background lights. The back right section really needs to be clear. I like that shape back there of those picture frames. So what we've done is, of course, our camera is still set to 6300K. The light color temperature was adjusted to 6500K. And you're thinking, wow, well, that looks a little blue, right? Well, it is. But remember, the main light is super warm, and it's going to spill backwards onto that wall. And when the little bit of light from the main light matches the lot of bit of light from this background light, we're going to get a perfect 6300K match. That's why it looks so neutral back there. Now, if we didn't do any correction on that light, this is how warm it would look. It's a 5200K track light. And the hair light, we didn't do anything to it. That's just another 5200K track light pointed straight down. And the center and the background, pretty cool, huh? We wanted that to be blue on purpose. We really wanted that to snap off a little bit of contrast between those warm skin tones. So camera white balance set to 6300K, and we gelled that track light so it's up to 9250. Crazy, huh? And if we didn't do anything, that track light is not a 5200K like the ones up front. That's a 4900K track light. We do adjust the warmth in our studio a little bit here using different types of color temperature. If you practice making your light neutral to start off with and finding out how to get the perfect, most cleanest light to go through your camera and make a neutral shot, then using color temperature adjustment like this for Creative Tool is super easy. You know, remember I said that you're going to be a little perplexed, and that's okay. That's normal to feel like, oh my gosh, what just hit me? Go back and watch this video a couple more times. And when you get to see that sequence that I just showed you and you're able to predict what's going to happen next, then you know you got it. Now, we are going to have to kind of take two different pathways right here. People who are going to use LEDs that are more in the affordable category, and people who have the luxury of buying premium LEDs. What's the big deal? Well, the low-cost LEDs are problematic. They've got color temperature problems, and they also have light balance problems, and we'll come back to that in a second. The more expensive LEDs, right? You can spend $3,000 on a beautiful 1 foot by 1 foot LED panel that has no green shift, no LB problems at all, and you have adjustable color temperature. But please don't think because a light, an LED light that has adjustable color temperature is going to be super premium and going to have gorgeous light quality. It's not the case. No matter if you go for a premium light or if you go for a budget light, you need to know all this stuff, and you also need to be in control of the LED's 3 primary properties. Ready? Okay, take a look at this. three components to our LED that we have to pay attention to in order to dial it in for hybrid photography. First is brightness, right? How bright or dark it's going to be. Second is its color temperature. That's the overall color cast, if you will, of warm, cool, just right. Then, of course, there's LB. That's the light balance value. That's a little bugger that when it gets out of balance, it makes things like fluorescent lights look green, right? We can go buy fluorescent lights that are 5500 Ks, and they might be stamped with the word daylight on them. But are they the same light quality as the sun? Not even close. They may have a significant green shift, and of course, LEDs do too. One of my problems is LEDs that have a big green shift. That's a big LB problem. There's no working with those. Why? Well, you probably know that most LEDs are going to have adjustable brightness, right? And a lot of LEDs are going to offer a model with adjustable color temperature from daylight to tungsten. Well, some not so terrific LEDs, when you adjust the color temperature, you're also adjusting that magenta green shift. That's nothing but a problem. Remember, gels are available for us to control brightness. There's neutral density gels if you need them. They're also available for us to control color temperature, right? CTO gels push our color temperature down. CTB gels push our color temperature up. Then, of course, there's always LB gels, light balancing gels. Those are your minus greens and your plus greens, right? We're going to go into more detail about those in just a few minutes. But we'll be able to have each one of those components controlled separately. What you do need to know, though, is sometimes with some lower cost LEDs, when you adjust the color temperature, you're adjusting the LB shift. Hard to believe, but do you know some manufacturers of LEDs we've tested have, in the middle of their color temperature adjustment, have really good color. They have zero LB shift, no green or no magenta, no nothing. But as soon as you adjust their color temperature up to the top where it's daylight or to the bottom where it's tungsten, you end up picking up 4, 5, 6 points of green. That's not good. We are recommending only LEDs that, if they do have a green shift, that we can easily get rid of them with one single gel, maybe 2 gels. But if we're getting higher and lower green shifts as we adjust the color or adjust the brightness, there's a bunch of different sizes and shapes of LEDs, and choose whichever ones work best for you. But you will find that there are LEDs that work on a camera, so those are going to have the ability to slide typically into a hot shoe. They'll also have the ability to mount to a stand that's on your camera, or sometimes you can just clamp them to your tripod. These are lightweight and typically low power, and they've got options on whether or not they're going to be powered by rechargeable batteries, or if you're going to be able to put disposable batteries into them. Then, on the upper end of the scale, there are studio LEDs, and these typically take the shape of 12 inches wide by 12 inches tall. We call those 1x1s because they're 1 foot by 1 foot. And they are an array, meaning a set of LEDs that make up one specific light. And we can use these typically plugged in AC power, but a lot of people can get big pro video batteries and use them in battery mode as well. Now, both of these sizes and types of LEDs have their place, right? You're not really going to put the studio one on your camera, and you certainly don't want to put 15 of those small little ones in the studio in a big softbox. But there are LEDs that are in the middle. There's a brand that we like called DLC Dotline, and this is their model 320DV. This has adjustable color temperature, and it's got adjustable brightness, and this kind of goes in between. You can snap one of these on your camera, or you can put 2 or 3 of these together and put them inside a softbox in the studio. Smart choice. Another smart choice is, of course, those of you that read Discover Mirrorless know we're very fond of the Quantum Omicron. It is a ring light, but don't let that fool you. It's more than just a ring light. We use this as a fill light. We use it as a main light inside a softbox, and we've used it as standalone background lights for many, many shoots. So it doesn't really matter what size or shape your LED system is, as long as it works for you and it's got the color quality that you are expecting. If, for instance, you're like my buddy Mark Hauser and you just shoot black and white portraits, well, you can buy the lower cost LEDs that have some color problems, right? Because you're only going to be shooting in black and white. totally fine. But if you're going to be shooting very precise, clean colors, usually the more money you spend on your LEDs, the better image quality you're going to get. And don't forget, one of our kind of things that we deal with here is we're shooting video, like right here, and we want our video to look as sharp as our photo stuff does. So unfortunately, we tend to buy the more expensive LEDs because we don't like to do post-processing when it comes to correcting color in video. This video you're looking at right now has no post-processing done to it at all. That's straight from the camera, right under the editing deck, and now I'm talking to you. So be wise when you choose your LEDs. We can control just about any quality of light that we want to by using a special type of filter made just for light sources. These are widely used by the cine and filmmaker and video motion picture guys. They're called gels, and they are sheets of plastic that are heat tolerant. They're not heat resistant. They will melt, but they have a very high temperature before they turn into goop and smoke and burst into flames. So one of the beauties of LED is we are able to use these gels without thinking twice about getting them too close to a very hot continuous light source. And we can use gels for flash, right, for any sort of strobe that we want to change color temperature as well as light balance. And we can also get sheets of diffusion material when we want to too. So we're able to shape and craft and sculpt the light exactly the way we want it, either by taking the LED and adjusting the color temperature and the brightness controls if you happen to have an LED that does that, or we can use the gels. Now, don't be afraid of gels. They're very inexpensive. They're super easy to use. You just cut them up to whatever size you need to, and you buy them in a couple different varieties. Here's where it's a little crazy. In order to adjust the color temperature of your gels, you need to buy ones that are either CTO or CTB. Here's what I mean. CTO means color temperature orange, and that is going to lower your color temperature. The full CTO goes the full distance from daylight, 5600K, all the way down to 3400K. That's why it's called a full CTO. Next, there's a half CTO. That goes half the distance from daylight down to tungsten, and if you take two half CTOs and put them together, they'll roughly give you the equivalent of one full CTO. There's also a quarter CTO, and it's half of the half, and then there's an eighth CTO. That's the lightest, the thinnest CTO that we can use. Now, CTO is going to lower our light's color temperature. The opposite of CTO is CTB, color temperature blue. And it's going to allow us to take a tungsten light source that's color temperature 32, 34, 3600K, and move it up to daylight, which is 55, 5600K. So CTB gels, color temperature blue, increase color temperature. So think blue moves my color up. Orange moves my color down. The next kind of gel is used for adjusting the LB, the magenta green shift. Remember the LEDs have that little problem of green and magenta kind of creeping around? Well, these are gels that are either magenta, which is minus green, or they're green, which is plus green. That's how we order them. There really is no magenta. That is actually a minus green gel. Okay, here's a great tip for you. Anytime you cut up a gel to make a smaller gel to tape onto a light source, make sure you take a Sharpie and write what that gel is on the corner of the gel. Don't have to worry about it messing up the color or anything. Just make sure every time you cut one up, you label what it is, because you'll never be able to tell them apart. So you can get a full minus green, or you can get a half minus green, a quarter minus green, an eighth minus green. Now, an eighth minus green is going to give you a little bit of magenta gel filtration that will get rid of a little bit of green. And a quarter minus green is twice as strong as a 1/8, and that's the one you're probably going to end up using the most. When you've got an LED that's a little green, you're probably going to need the quarter green. No, it's a great idea to get the eighths as well, and if you think you need a half, that's okay too, but you can always use multiple layers. cares? So you buy these gels anywhere you want to. The brand that I would encourage you to buy is called Lee. They have a very good website. Take a look right here. They're big into cine, but don't get confused. The language that they use on that website is made for filmmakers, not for photographers. I've spoken to these guys. They're great folks, but they don't understand we photographers. They're not going to change and talk in our language of adjusting color temperature and adjusting green values of LEDs. They're not interested in that. But they do have a website loaded with lots of education, and I can tell you that brand is very consistent. So if you want, hop online. You can buy from Amazon, buy from anybody you want to. You'll end up getting your sheets that are 20 by 24 inches, I think, for $6, $7, $8, right? Then go ahead and cut them up with a regular pair of scissors. Gels are your ticket to sculpting your light any way you want to, and that allows you to take a lower cost LED, adjust it so it's got all of its green absorbed, right? There's no green shift. We can't deal with LED problems, but then you can mess around with its color temperature and sculpt the color that you want out of your LEDs. Good stuff, huh? So are you comfortable with the whole idea of the white point setting in your camera is kind of equal to the color temperature of your light yet? Hang on, it'll come to you. It's kind of like riding a bicycle, right? Let's say that we have a light source that's 5,500 degrees K and it has 0 lb shift, and we really like this light source. We can set the white balance of our camera to 5,500 degrees K and we're going to get nice neutral colors. Well, let's say that, like in this shot, we've got warm light coming off this way, a little neutral light coming here, and we've got neutral light this way. Be thinking about what those different color temperatures are. Now, let's say that we have our white balance on our camera set to 5,500 K. Well, then what is the color temperature of that light? Of course, it's 5,500 K because it's perfectly clear, bright white. But look at what happens when it comes down this way. It gets warmer, doesn't it? That's right. What's the color of light in that spot, the color temperature? Sure, it's lower than 5,500 K, isn't it? Yeah, right there is about 4,800 K. Well, look at over here on the side of my face. It's a little warmer this way, really warm this way. And then I've got another light that's neutral over here, and I've got a fill light up this way too. Be thinking how you want to sculpt your light when it comes to color, and then make it happen the way you want it. You got to be thinking there's a faster way, right? Than all this guess and check with the gels? Well, there is. A color meter is going to get you much, much closer, but don't forget that color meters really aren't made to measure LEDs, and as much as really expensive good ones like the Sekonic are, they're not 100% reliable when it comes to measuring color temperature as well as LB values of LEDs. Now, they are when it comes to flash and continuous light sources like fluorescent and tungsten lights, but they really get thrown a curveball with all those waves and spikes in the LED's output spectral response. I know, don't you hate it when I say tech stuff like that? Sorry. Now, you also need to realize that when you start going into auto white balance, you can set up a shot just like this, and depending on what camera you have and how your camera picks up its white balance data, it might jump around all over the place. So those folks that use white balance all the time in auto mode might want to take a look at one of the other white balances. We call them static white balances. One last thing. There are a lot of good uses for custom white balance, and in the DSLR world, I tend to use custom white balance a lot. I do find as I move into mirrorless cameras, I don't need custom white balance as much as we did before. I'm finding that because I can take most video-capable mirrorless cameras and plug them into televisions, I'm able to fine-tune my color with a mirrorless camera maybe a little bit better than I can with a DSLR. Crazy, right? I know, and it doesn't matter to me which camera you use, but I can tell you my color in my studio and my color confidence has gone way up because when I'm shooting, I'm plugged in through an HDMI cable to a television. I'm about to make the techno gearhead folks extremely happy because I'm going to show graphs. Yeah, I'm about to make people that really hate all the technical stuff about photography even more scared than they probably are right now. So it's okay, relax. I want to show you something that's very important. Why is it so critical for us to gain such precise control over LEDs? Are we just making a mountain out of a molehill? Well, no. LEDs produce light that's a little on the fragile side. The sun and flash and other light sources produce a larger volume of usable light than LEDs do. Now, this has got nothing to do with brightness. It's the volume of different colors, the frequencies, if you will, of different colors that we need to put light on a person or a subject and reflect it back off and through a lens and onto a camera sensor. It's important to have all of those lights, or at least as much of that light as we can. First up, let's take a look at the spectral output response, forgive me for using the technical term, of daylight at 5,500 degrees K. And you're going to notice that you've got the blue and you've got the red and you've got all the Roy G. Biv colors actually backwards from wavelength on the bottom. That's what we're doing. And then volume going top to bottom. You're going to see that daylight is really not a straight, even line, right? That is not a straight, even line. But what does matter is the area under that line. The volume of light that's underneath that little squiggly line is all the stuff that we're going to use in order to make a really cool looking image. Well, when we take, and instead of using daylight, we use a different type of light modifier, like tungsten light, right? Like a decent light bulb, or my track lights here. And when we convert those to 5500K, so it starts off as tungsten, and then I put a blue gel on them in order to make them 5500 degrees K, look at how much light volume there is there. That's pretty good, right? Well, when we move down to flash, we lose a little bit of that light volume. And we see here that daylight flash is kind of an unusual shape, but remember, keep in mind, it's all the information below the squiggly line that's important to us. That's the only information that our cameras can make a picture from. Well, what happens when we go into unusual lights, lights that aren't continuous and that aren't the sun? Let's take a look at a critically color-corrected fluorescent tube, the ones that we use in pro labs to view prints. This is 5500K of fluorescent light, and notice we're starting to get a little thinner, right? All this data underneath the squiggly line is getting smaller. The volume, the amount of light that we have to deal with down here is getting less. And you can pretty much guess what happens if I show you, there you go, an LED that's set to 5500K. And this is a good quality LED, by the way. Look at how thin this is. This means that if we have our color off one way or another, too green, too magenta, too much color one way, not enough color another way, we're going to run out of accurate color in order to make skin tones look like skin tones. If you use a lower quality LED, you're going to find out that they're just deficient in certain colors, and you will never be able to get a proper skin tone, for instance, when you use those super low quality LEDs with your camera. They're just not going to work. The light's not there. So LEDs, and moving up the chain, we get to flash. And then, of course, the best light for photography is the sun. You probably knew that, didn't you? Well, there's one more little tech subject that we've got to discuss. It's called the CRI. That stands for Color Rendering Index. And it's a number that's unfortunately being misused in the world of LED lighting for photo and video. The CRI typically refers to how high of a light quality a light source is. And a CRI of 100 would be perfect, and a CRI of 70 is pretty much not acceptable for photo and video. And there are plenty of architectural lights, for instance, that are well under CRI 70 that are just fine for lighting up the inside of an airplane or a car, but not going to make a good quality skin tone. Unfortunately, a handful of manufacturers have chosen to rely maybe a little too heavily on CRI that don't really apply to LED, because remember those crazy waveforms that we showed you a little bit earlier? Yeah, that means that using a high CRI measured at only one setting on the LED doesn't really equate to the rest of the LED at the rest of its power settings and color temperature settings. So please don't buy a light based on the CRI alone. All right, some LEDs don't have a ton of power, right? Okay, how do you reduce the light output of other lights, like these track lights that I've got in the room here? No problem. You want to use screen as often as you can, and no need to buy the expensive stuff from the film supply place. Go to Home Depot and get metal screen. You know, like the kinds you put in a door to keep the bugs out of your house? All right, make sure you don't get the plastic one or the plastic coated one, because if it gets hot, it's going to get really smelly. But metal screen, cut them with tin snips. Then make yourself a little section of small little squares that you could put on any light source that you want to. That's called scrim in the big boy world. But when you buy it from Home Depot, it's called screen. It's a heck of a lot less money. Also, if you want to shape the light, there is one tool that you can get from the film supply places that's really cool. It's a roll of aluminum foil that's got flat black paint on it. It's called cinefoil, or also foil black. There's lots of different names for it, but that's a great way to not only block out lights, but also shape lights to make them the shape that you want them. All right, how do you know if you have a color problem? How do you know if your camera and your light sources are actually in sync with each other? Well, of course, you can have a big fancy production monitor that's super color calibrated, and you can actually look at it in a color controlled environment. Yeah, that's not going to happen, right? Not even I have all that stuff. Well, here's what you can do. Did you know, Macintosh users, that you have a utility called a digital color meter that's in your utilities? It might be in your applications folder, that allows you to mouse over any area on any screen and tell you what the red, green, and blue values are? Perfect. PC folks, hop on, don't buy the pay ones, find a utility that's free that does the same thing. Now you have to make sure that you set your little digital utility to work in a specific gamut or color space that's very similar to video, which is sRGB. I know, it would be great if it was Adobe RGB, but it's not. Video has a specific white point and a specific contrast and a specific range of colors that are very similar to sRGB. So make sure on your Macintosh digital color meter display tool thing that you didn't know you had, you set it to sRGB for its reference of colors. Then, when you're going to mouse over an area that you wonder if it's warm or it's cool or if it's neutral, here's what you do. Take a neutral piece of paper, or of course, I like to use the color checker charts, right? I like the small one that's called the color checker passport, but you can use a neutral piece of paper if you're super duper on a budget. I'm going to put that into the shot that I want to measure to see what value is neutral or not neutral. Then I'm going to mouse over the top of it with my digital color meter, and I'm going to look at the red, green, and blue values. Look at here. Now, don't expect it to be to the 10th of a decimal point. It's not going to be that way. But you can tell if something is warm by reading the red, green, and blue. If it's lower in its blue, that means it's warmer. If it's low in its blue, that means it's, going to need to be adjusted a little bit, probably. You'll also find out this is a great way to chase down the green problems. If you can use the eyedropper tool in Photoshop, for instance, or Lightroom, and measure the piece of video or the piece of photo, you'll learn real quick if you've got a green problem. So let's say you buy a brand new LED. And the manufacturer says that it's 5500K is its white point. How do you know if it is or if it isn't? Here's exactly what you do. You get your camera and your best lens. You put it in the most neutral color settings that you have, the default standard sRGB settings for your camera. Then you're going to make yourself a picture using adjustable K white balance at 5500K. Because your manufacturer says that light is 5500K, and your camera is actually a pretty good judge of what is 5500K and what's not. So either shoot a JPEG in sRGB, don't use RAW by the way, that'll mess up the test, or shoot a chunk of video that's got no crazy processing at all. Then move your digital color meter or your eyedropper tool over that area, and you're going to find out if it's high in its blue values, that means it's cool. So the color temperature is not 5500K. The color temperature could be 56, 57, 58, 5900K. And if you find out that the blue value is low and the red value is high, that means it's warmer. Then its color temperature is lower. Remember the relationship between the white point setting on your camera and the color temperature of your light. Now, I wish I could give you the values for what, say, a 1/8 green minus green gel is going to do, but I can't. It's not a linear system here. It's an algorithmic system. So there's no this gel equals this many units of red and green and blue. It just doesn't work that way. So there is a little bit of trial and error, but the good news is at least gels aren't expensive, and you probably already have a tool that has an eyedropper in it. Just don't be afraid to shoot video instead of shooting a photo, and make sure that your system is set to sRGB when you're measuring color values with video. And don't be afraid of it. Play with it. Oh, another thing. Don't buy those expensive automated color repair utilities for video. Forget it. You can do it much easier on free pieces of software, and probably faster too. Isn't it funny how some people get so bent out of shape when they pay for educational content that if we even mention the brand of the LED, all of a sudden, oh, it's a commercial for that particular brand. Well, it's not. I do need to tell you that we do have some brands of tools that pay us advertising dollars or hire us to create marketing collateral, right, educational collateral, or that sponsor me as a photographer in certain ways. And when we get to one of those brands, I will be glad to let you know. So I'm not being paid by anybody to say anything, particularly not on this piece of video, right? Anytime we make a ShootSmarter brand piece of video, that is independent, and it does not have a bias other than the fact that there are certain tools that I'm very comfortable with, and I'm very quick to pick them up and to recommend them. So first up, what we're using to shoot this video was Panasonic Lumix GH3, as well as the Lumix GH2, and a variety of different lenses, but primarily these two lenses. The Olympus 45mm f1.8, which I adore, and how I get this super shallow depth of field, that isn't post-processing, right? There's no post-processing on this piece of video here whatsoever. That is super shallow depth of field, and then making sure that Louis refocuses every time between the takes, so we don't have me way out of focus back here. Next, we're taking the audio and we're running it through a GarageBand recorder and then mixing it in later. So I'm not going back into the camera with my audio. They're two separate files, and then we're able to put them together in post. Lighting is very important. The first light, let's go right with our main light. That is the brand is called Creative Light, and that's a 2-foot by 2-foot softbox, but it does have the front diffuser on it, but the middle diffuser, the internal baffle, if you will, has been taken out because it's driven by an Omicron, the Quantum Omicron, that ring light that I love so much, works perfectly in a softbox. It's crazy. Even the manufacturers didn't even know that that was one of those things that you could put into a softbox and fuel it. And in fact, Louis, my crazy intern, was the one that said, hey, why can't we put this in a box? Well, actually, you don't really sound like that, do you, Lou? Kinda. Yeah, he does, actually. He said, why don't we just put that in a softbox? He sounds more like Mickey Mouse, doesn't he? Well, we did, and guess what? Boom, it lit it up, and it's gorgeous. I mean, this is exactly the light quality that I want. So the white point on the camera's white balance is set to adjustable K, of course, and it is at 6500 K. That's because I have this background already lit from that opening shot that we did with the TV in the background, right? And by the way, putting TVs or computer screens in the video shot should be avoided at all costs. I only did that because I wanted to show off about how good our team is and all our tools that we really can put a moving TV in there. So anyway, we've got the color temperature set to 50/50 on this main light, and my fill light is a little Manfrotto 840 LED that I just adore. These little guys are a little pricey for what they are, but the quality is very good. I am raising the color temperature of the Manfrotto LED by using a 1/4 CTB gel. So how do you stick gels onto LEDs? Tape is great. If you go and you use the heavy-duty tape from Home Depot, like the Gorilla Tape, that super-duper waterproof duct tape, that's all well and good. But if you use your LEDs outside, or if they're in a place that they're going to generate a lot of heat, that can get kind of goopy really quick. So you might be best off just using masking tape. Believe it or not, a good grade of masking tape is fine. Now, if you happen to be in a film supply store, there's a really good tape called gaffer's tape. Kind of expensive. It's a cloth-based tape, but that's the best one of them all. But you can pay up to $30 a roll for that stuff. What? So on the Omicron, that's the Omicron 4, I have the ability to adjust the color temperature up and down, and it is wonderful. I also have the ability to adjust more power than I can ever need for this kind of a setting too. It could actually be, I know, hard to believe LEDs can be too bright, right? Well, they can. Well, next, the light that we've got here, actually this is a little different than the first shot we did. You'll notice that I've turned on these cabinet lights. So that is a dimmer switch that I've got set all the way down right before it goes dark. My ISO on the camera, by the way, is set to 200, which is why we've got really nice picture quality, of course, but how I was able to get that nice shallow depth of field. Next, this light behind me, you'll see that it's a little bit on the bluish side, right? It's a little past. In earlier shots, this is neutral. In fact, this is neutral because it's not pure white. This is pure white. The walls are painted here in a neutral gray and a neutral white just for this purpose. Well, that's a high color temperature color because the track lights that we have in the room here, those are all regular track light fixtures that you can buy anywhere, but the bulbs are different. The bulbs are a brand called Ico Solux. And you can buy these in different wattages and different angles of coverage and in different color temperatures. And guess what? Their red, green, and blue values are phenomenal. These are really well-balanced lights. So if you have an interior that you want to make your prints really sizzle, or you've got a TV screen that you want to show off your hybrid E products with, using color-controlled track light is really terrific. So we do monkey around with the color temperature on a creative purpose, like this, right? I want it warm over here, right? See the low color temperature there? That's from these dimmer lights because these are about 2,500 degrees K, right? Then we've got a little higher over here, and I'm wearing a blue shirt, and I like it warm here and neutral there, right? See it? The background goes from warm, whoop, to cool, and then my face goes from warm, whoop, to cool. There you go. That's just one of the things I do. Hair light, of course, is just going to have the metal scrim, that screen on there from Home Depot to knock it down so that it looks fine on a production monitor that I've got over here. And that's really it. We only have to carry a handful of different tool modifiers and different brands of products in order to make things look really terrific. The other brands of products that we used in the making of this video were on the other set. Remember the other shot that we did, that funky one with the picture offset? Right. Those are lit by the studio LEDs that I use, and that's a brand from Bowen's called Limelight. And we've got two different versions. They both look identical, but one of them has adjustable color temperature and the other one doesn't. It's fixed at daylight. Now you can buy them fixed at tungsten, but we're more daylight kind of photographers. So we've got 4 of those 1 foot by 1 foot LED panels. We power them on AC. They do have the ability to run on big Anton Bauer batteries, but those aren't batteries that we have. Those are Pro Video Guy batteries, and we just don't use those here. We have more than enough different types of batteries that we have to deal with, that we don't need to be adding one more. So we find out that with our arrangement of tools, right, our first tool for making all these color decisions is going to be our eyes on the back of the camera, or as well as plugged into that big TV screen you see in the back, really does allow us to shoot in the studio here with terrific color control. The next tool that I like a whole lot is I do use that Sakana color meter that you saw in there. I do use that a lot, and I'm not recommending that you have to go buy one of those, but it does make things really fast, and this is kind of what I'm selling to commercial clients, that this kind of look and this quality of photo, video doesn't matter. That's a big deal for us. The next tool that we're using is that red, green, and blue color measuring tool on Mac. Isn't that like the coolest thing? And PC folks, go get that utility. Just make sure it works. It gives you data in the sRGB space. Some of them work only in the LAB space, which technically is more accurate, but really, video is sRGB. Let's just go ahead and live with it there, right? Then beyond that, the other handful of tools, the gels, the tripods, the light stands, the regular group of stuff, right? The one LED that I did talk about just a little bit is DLC. That stands for Dotline Corporation, and they're good friends of mine in Los Angeles, and this is not a plug for them, but anyway. But that really is a terrific LED because it takes the basic Sony NP rechargeable batteries, so you can buy those batteries anywhere, and you can get really long last power out of those things.